Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So let's continue with 4 MRA arguments that actually have a point and where they go wrong by Susanna Wise. And we've finally reached the second argument of 4, which is fathers are as important as mothers.
Another common men's rights issue is child custody and, more generally, men's ability to play as active a role in the family as women do.
Now, you'll see she's mentioned child custody, and the discrimination in the family court is a major men's rights issue. But this is the only time she mentions it in the entire segment, which is strange considering its importance. Well, strange unless your goal is to dismiss men's issues, right? So what does she talk about instead? Well, she talks about women being oppressed by housework, of course. It's pretty obvious this is just a means to dismiss an important men's issue and try to refocus on a women's issue. That is, if it's even a women's issue, as we'll see. And she's doing this so she can make the claim that women have it worse, of course. Because, you know, a dad losing all contact with his kids isn't anywhere near as bad as a woman choosing of her own free will to stay at home and raise her kids, right? Sure, keep telling yourself that, Susanna. Next.
Feminists totally agree with this as well.
And of course Susanna forgets that now the largest feminist organisation in the world has been actively fighting against shared custody for the last 20 years. So much for agreeing with us on this one, right, Susanna? Not to mention that every time it's Father's Day we have some feminists try to make it about mothers. Because, you know, we don't have a Mother's Day due to patriarchal oppression or something. I'm not quite sure the reasoning. It seems that everything has to be about mothers and fathers are unimportant or something. But apparently, according to Susanna, feminists totally agree with us. Next.
Everyone should have a choice regarding what role they play in the family, and their gender shouldn't factor into that.
I would agree that everyone should have a choice. But the reality is women have more options when it comes to this.
Folks who say strong women are ruining their lives. Is it time for a men's movement? Well, that's next. Welcome back. You're watching Weekend Sunrise. The female breadwinner is on the rise, and with a shifting society, the question of where men fit in is more poignant than ever.
As the breadwinner in her family, CEO of PepsiCo, Indra Nooyi, spoke this week about the choices that she has to make each day between family and work.
You are going to be a wife or a mother. In fact, many times during the day, you have to make those decisions. And you have to co-opt a lot of people to help you. We co-opted our families to help us. We plan.
According to some men, that is a choice that men do not have.
But if you ask our daughters...
Now, joining us from Houston, Texas to discuss why he thinks women have it better than men and why it's time for a male movement is the founder of A Voice for Men, Paul Elam. Good morning to you, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Now, you've said that women have about 50 years on men when it comes to liberation, but many women would argue that men have always held most of the power. So what is behind your argument that you need a men's movement?
Well, I think the story that you're talking about now will give you a very good example. What we need is a re-examination of power. Right, just now you described a woman who is trapped between work and family, the pressures of a high-paying position, the demands that come with that, and then coming home to feeling the demands of a family that needs her in other ways. This is the same experience men have had throughout history. Now, is that power? That's arguable, and that's the type of discussion that we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, many men, you know, may, without even consciously knowing it, feel trapped by the gender roles that they are assigned. Your movement says that men, you know, you actually come out and say that men really don't have the same number of choices as women. So how are men limited by society in ways that women are not, Paul?
Well, one way I've heard it phrased, which I think is very accurate, is that women now have several choices, three in particular. One, they can work full-time and pursue a career. They can be at home and be stay-at-home mothers and housewives and choose that path, or they can do a combination of both. The choices in our society for men are to work full-time, or the third choice is to work full-time.
Although we're seeing that changing in Australia already. We spoke to some men recently, and already in Australia about 25% of households have women as the primary breadwinner, and about, I think, 9% of households have men as the stay-at-home carer. So it's starting to change.
Yes, it is. I think it's starting to change. It's also starting to change here in the United States. However, the social attitudes toward men that stay at home, men that don't work, are still what's lagging behind. We have words for women who stay at home and take care of the home and the children. We call that a housewife. Often the word we might use for men who stay at home and don't work while their wives work is gigolo.
I'll include a clip from Karen after my credits, which sums up this lack of choice for men perfectly. But before going back to the article, let's look at some stats. Pew Research has found that 23% of mothers think they spend too little time with their children, compared to 46% of men. In other words, double. Almost equal numbers of mothers and fathers say that parenting is extremely important to their identity. It seems about a quarter of men would like the homemaker role, and around 56% of women. But let's go back to the article.
In fact, having more equal households benefits people of all genders. In relationships between men and women, for example, women whose male partners are helping out around the house are more able to prioritize their careers.
It seems she has this backwards, claiming that women are held back in their careers because men won't help out around the house is bullshit. As we saw with the previous stats, more women want the homemaker role once they have children. But let's look at the hours spent in both paid and unpaid work for mothers and fathers in dual income families. So once again, from Pew Research, we see fathers on average do more work outside the home, and mothers on average do more housework and childcare. So when we add up the totals, we see mothers do an average of 59 hours and fathers do an average of 58 hours. So that's bloody close. And I have some more stats from Australia which backs this up. So for fathers, it's an average of 76 hours, and for mothers, it's an average of 79 hours. So 3 hours difference in total. Once again, very close. Now keep in mind that these surveys are self-reporting, so it may not be 100% accurate. Some people may over-report while others under-report. But even if we don't take that into consideration, it's very close. Now, my opinion is very simple. If both parents do an equal number of paid hours outside the home, they should do an equal number of hours in the home. That is, on average. There may be some other factors to take into consideration. For example, if one partner has a much longer commute to work or their job is more physically demanding, you might want to take that into consideration. But generally speaking, if they do an equal number of hours of paid work, then it's only fair they do an equal number of hours of unpaid work in the home. But once a couple has kids, that's not the norm. One parent, usually the father, tends to spend more time doing paid work, therefore it would be unreasonable for that partner to do an equal number of hours of unpaid work. And generally speaking, it is the mother who is choosing to shift the part-time work or give up work completely to raise her children. But let's continue.
But men's smaller role in the household is also not evidence that they're oppressed.
Okay, I have to ask this question. Is there a law somewhere that whenever a feminist writes an article about the men's rights movement, they have to include a part where they claim that we claim that we're oppressed, because it's in just about every single article. And it shows that they have no fucking idea what they're talking about, because we don't go around claiming that we're oppressed. We don't think women are oppressed either in the West. What we think is that both men and women have issues. Having issues does not mean you're oppressed. It means you have issues, and those issues should be talked about and tackled. Unfortunately, when it comes to men, they tend to be ignored. This, however, is not oppression. If you actually took the time to listen to us, you would understand that. But unfortunately, they see the world through the feminist lens, in which there has to be an oppressor and an oppressed class, and if men say they have issues, in their mind, that means we're saying that women are the oppressors. Stop projecting your fucking bullshit on us and actually listen to what we're saying. You're meant to be a fucking journalist, but it seems that you make up the answers without doing any research. And unfortunately, this is the standard we're living with. This isn't the exception, this is the fucking norm. And I'm sick of saying in every fucking video, we don't believe we're oppressed. Yet it always fucking comes up. Next.
Once again, we need to look not just at the way things are, but also at the underlying ideologies. There's nothing inherently oppressive about being a stay-at-home parent or being a breadwinner. The oppression lies in the beliefs that leave women confined to the former position while men are confined to the latter, and non-binary people are totally erased.
Okay, once again, this is not oppression, but the issue here is that women typically have more choice than men, and that women typically choose to spend more time with their families. Now, if men were given an equal choice, an equal opportunity, I don't know if I'd say that there would be an equal number of men choosing to stay at home, but there definitely would be more. That's the issue here. It's not the oppression Olympics. We're not trying to say that men are oppressed or women are oppressed. It's a matter of choice. Next.
Women are deemed ideal homemakers because people expect free labor from them and don't consider them as capable of most jobs.
Okay, let's look at this. Fucking hell. Women are deemed ideal homemakers because people expect free labor from them and don't consider them as capable of most jobs. Okay. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and just for the sake of argument, and let me stress, just for the sake of argument, I'm going to say that this is true. Let's say that people, or men, because that's who she's really talking about, men expect free labor from women because they're women, right? That's the argument. But if that's the argument, if that's reality, then she's only putting forward half the picture here. Because the other half is women expect free money from men, right? If women are spending most of their time looking after kids and doing housework for the family, and that's the expectation of free labor, and men in turn are doing more hours paid work, that means that women have the expectation of free money from men. Now, I'm sure if I went out and said that seriously, there would be a lot of feminists who would be outraged at that. Once again, I'm not suggesting that's reality. I'm just playing devil's advocate. What I do believe is that both men and women, mothers and fathers, contribute to the family, and typically they do so in different ways. Men are more likely to contribute financially, and women are more likely to contribute with housework or childcare. And as we saw in the stats earlier, women staying at home and looking after their kids is their choice. Unless you believe they're brainwashed by the patriarchy, which I expect a lot of feminists actually do think that. But anyway, let's continue.
Men are deemed ideal breadwinners because they are considered deserving of money and capable of earning it.
Men are deemed ideal breadwinners because they are considered deserving of money. Okay, the point is, the men we're talking about aren't earning money for themselves. They're earning money for their families. Okay? They're not earning the money and spending it all on themselves. Typically, they're doing more overtime, working more weekends, more holidays, more night shifts, travelling further away from their family, and doing more dangerous work than women on average, while missing out on seeing their kids grow, all to provide for their families, not for their egos, not so they've got more money in their wallet to spend on themselves, but for their fucking families. Next.
Even though its effects can be negative, this belief itself is positive toward men.
Yeah, I would strongly disagree with this. I personally believe having a mix of family life and work life is better for most people. I don't have kids, but if I did have kids, I'd want to spend time with them when they were young and watch them grow up. That to me would be better than being stuck in an office or a factory or whatever for, most of my fucking life. So men are more likely to miss watching their kids grow up, and then they're more likely to be separated from them when they get divorced. Notice that she's not talking about that anywhere. And this somehow is all seen as a positive towards men. Next.
Yes, there's also the belief that men are great with children or household chores. But since child rearing and homemaking are devalued in our society, this belief is not as pejorative as the belief that someone doesn't belong in the workplace.
Do we still have the belief that women don't belong in the workplace? Really? I mean, there may be some people out there who still believe that, but I think they're in the minority. No doubt that attitude would have been a lot more common in the 50s and 60s, but we've been through a lot since then, and things have changed. So I don't believe that's a realistic worldview. And I don't believe that child rearing and homemaking is devalued either, although I have seen that done by some feminists. But it's interesting the number of ad campaigns which tend to portray men as bumbling idiots and the women, the mothers, as the smart, intelligent ones who keep everything together. I mean, obviously this is pandering towards the mothers, right? Because they're the ones who buy the products, and it's feeding their ego. So it's definitely not devaluing motherhood or homemaking in those circumstances. Next.
Aside from the root ideologies, the other thing that determines whether or not a family structure is oppressive is whether people have a choice. And like MRAs, feminists believe men, and anyone of any gender involved in parenting a child, should have a choice in their familial role.
Now, I would agree with Susanna here that choice is the key factor, right? Men and women should have choice when it comes to what roles they fulfill in their family. And men should be given more choice, more options. There should be more acceptance of, the stay-at-home dad, right? And we should be more open to men having more of a balance between work and family. But ultimately, it should be up to the individuals. And they should be given the right to choose what works for them. In some cases, that may be the more traditional model where the wife stays at home and the husband works. In other cases, it might be a reverse of that, or some mix, or whatever. So ultimately, it should be the choice of the individuals. But we need to be open to different choices which, at the moment at least, don't fit the norm. And I think it would be healthier for a lot of men to spend more time with their family and less time at work. But once again, their choice. But Susanna has missed out on one key factor here. Now, she touched on it in the very first paragraph and then avoided it like the plague for the rest of this section of the article. And that is that a lot of men don't have any choice whatsoever when it comes to their children. Now, at the time of recording this, it was Father's Day yesterday here, and a survey by Fathers for Justice came out, and it says, do you expect to see your children this Father's Day? 22% said yes, 78% said no. So where is the choice there, Susanna? Why is it you're not talking about that? Now, to be fair, there were only 508 people who filled in this survey, which is a small number for a survey. But I do think it's fairly reflective of a lot of separated dads who don't get to see their children. I have friends in that situation, and I think we all know someone who's in that situation. So it's not an uncommon thing. So it would have been nice, Susanna, if you had have spent a bit more time talking about that, you know, that real issue, as opposed to women choosing to take time off work when they have kids and raise those kids of their own free choice. And I think it speaks volumes that you avoided that. But, you know, I'm not really surprised, to be honest. So the next episode in this series will be number 3, which is about circumcision. I think that's going to probably take 2 episodes at least to get through, because I really want to look at one of her citations, which is rather long, but full of shit. Yeah, trust me, it's really full of a lot of shit. We shouldn't be surprised at that, should we?
Now, I have an acquaintance who's at the moment in a very difficult marriage. When they got married, they were both high earners, and they purchased a home and lived a lifestyle based on their combined income of about $250,000 a year. Now, when they had a child, his wife changed the original deal they'd made. She unilaterally decided to deviate from the plan. She wasn't interested in going back to work in her old position. She was working full time at a high level, and this particular kind of job is not the kind of job you can do part time. After 6 months, she wasn't ready to return to work at all. After 18 months, she decided she would go back part time, earning less than a third of what she had been earning previously. Now, at this point, he suggested they sell the house that they had purchased in this beautiful, nice neighborhood and buy a more modest one and essentially live within their new means. You can guess how well that suggestion went over. So now he's working 60 to 70 hours a week, often hundreds or even thousands of miles away from home, to maintain the lifestyle that she's demanding. Now, one day a few months ago over the phone, he told my partner, and I'm quoting, "I haven't seen my kid in a month or my wife's vagina in 6. If this keeps up, I'm gonna cheat. Something's gotta give." And it's not like she's happy either, which is probably why he hasn't had a glimpse of her vagina in ages. She complains to him constantly that he's never around, and when he is around, he's not emotionally available. Now, why isn't he around? Because he's doing exactly what she is demanding of him, and that means being away. Why is he emotionally unavailable? Because I think if he actually told her how he feels about this situation, if he actually opened up and let it out, I can pretty much guarantee she'd pack up that kid and leave. I mean, she'd have to do that unless she was prepared to take responsibility for her part in the shit show that their marriage has become. And given how she's been thus far, I don't think she's gonna do that. She's not prepared to contribute financially to the lifestyle she herself is demanding. She's not prepared to tolerate him doing what it takes to maintain the lifestyle she's demanding. And she's definitely not prepared to take a good hard look at the position she's put him in, where he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't, and both damned outcomes involve him losing his kid and paying alimony through the nose because, she gave up her career to provide him with a kid he barely sees. Now, does he drop the feelings bomb now, become truly emotionally available to her? Or does he tie himself in knots trying to keep her from leaving for one more day, and then another, and then another? And what exactly would happen if this guy who's putting himself through all of this because it's what his wife is demanding of him, What would society have to say about him if he did cheat on her with, say, a prostitute in a work town who's willing to give him the girlfriend experience and listen without judgment across the pillow to his darkest thoughts about his situation? What a disgusting, weak man, just after sex, and someone to whine to like a stunted adolescent playing the victim. Now what, might I ask, would society say if she hooked up with an old flame on Facebook and had an affair? Well, how could we blame her? He was emotionally unavailable. He neglected her. He wasn't fulfilling her needs. She felt isolated and alone, stuck at home with a kid, which happens to be exactly where she insisted on being, and he's just not there for her, which happens to be exactly where she insisted on him being. She certainly deserves better than this guy, and her happiness is the most important thing, after all.
Be like, oh, that's all the feminism. That's all the feminism.